This game started out really, really solid for both teams offensively. Both teams on their first 2 drives scored 10 points. Or sorry, not their first 2 drives. Their first 4 drives scored 10 points. And then Georgia just put it on Tennessee. Tennessee offensively in the first half, they were able to move the ball. They had like 70 yards rushing in the first half, which is pretty good on around 16, 17 attempts. But then in the second half, Tennessee finished with negative 15 yards rushing. That is all those sacks and all those tackle for losses. Tennessee had 17 attempts in the first half. They got 70 yards. They had 19 attempts in the second half and had negative 15 yards. They finished with about a yard per carry in the game. We'll talk about that later. But, yeah, Georgia rolls over Tennessee in a hostile road environment. I don't even think this game was sold out, though, but still, it's a good win. Stetson Bennett played fine for the most part. He actually had a solid game. Goes 17 of 29, 213 yards, 1 touchdown. Did some damage on the ground, too. 8 carries, 40 yards, and he also had a touchdown run. Stetson Bennett was actually making plays today on third downs. And even that 1 second and long early in the game, right before the half, it was about 2nd and 16. He steps up, looks like he's going to take off, and he throws a bullet about a 12-yard pass to A.D. Mitchell. We'll talk about him in a second. But that was one of many solid plays that Stetson Bennett was actually able to make today. And then A.D. Mitchell pretty much had all of his 5 catches in the first half on that last drive. He had 5 catches for 65 yards. It's a solid game. But the story was James Cook. James Cook had a total of 13 touches for almost 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. What a game he had. He had 10 carries for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then he had 3 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown. What a game for James Cook. Other than that, rushing-wise, if you look at the stats look pretty good. 41 carries, 274 yards rushing against a really solid front 7. This Tennessee defense, for the most part this year, has been solid through the rush game. They've been kind of hit or miss. You look at some of their games, like to Florida, they gave up quite a bit on the ground. Even to Bama, one of the running backs, Robinson, had a decent game. The Ole Miss game, for the most part, Tennessee shut down the rush except for the quarterback keepers. But still, Tennessee's not a terrible rush defense team. They are not a good defensive team as a whole. And Georgia was able to go for almost 500 yards on Tennessee. They were pretty balanced again. It's what Georgia does best. But Georgia did not turn over the ball today, and that was pretty solid from Stetson Bennett. Georgia was able to create 2 turnovers in this game. We'll talk about the defense now. The most impressive part was the second half and complete domination. Joe Milton came in to relieve Hooker, went 6 of 9 for 88 yards and a touchdown. Okay, that's great. His last 2 drives were against the second and third teamers. That was pretty much Tennessee's entire offense in the second half. The last 2 drives with Joe Milton. Now, they were able to move the ball. Rushing-wise, though, they were completely dominated. And as I said earlier, Georgia gave up 70 yards rushing in the first half. Kirby Smart hates giving up a lot of rushing yards. And Tennessee was averaging around almost 4 yards per carry. But then in the second half, Georgia just put it on, and they recorded over 5 sacks in this game. Channing Tindall, what a game he had. I think he had 3 or 4 sacks himself, and they were all in the second half. So that was very, 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 very pleasing. Small Tennessee's best running back was held to 12 carries, 49 yards coming into this game. He was looking at almost 400 yards this year. He's a sophomore. Tennessee just wasn't able to run the ball. The passing, Hendon Hooker, he did throw for 240 yards, but he threw 37 passes, so that's barely even 7 yards per attempt. He had that 1 terrible interception to Kendrick. And like we said earlier, Joe Milton just came in for relieving duties. So there's not really anything else to say about that. Tillman had a really good game. Cedric Tillman for Tennessee. He He had 10 catches for 200 yards. But that's really about it. A 41-17 dominating win for UGA.